Hi, this is Kara Murphy with piXL Drone Show podcast. It is Thursday, May 13th, and today we are thrilled to have Nils Thorjussen from Verge Aero on our show as a guest. If you watched Joe Biden's celebration as president-elect back in November, you certainly noticed that there was a drone light show, and that is Nils' company, Verge Aero, that is responsible for it. And I'd like to thank my friend Matt Quinn from Great Lakes Drones for making that initial connection. I did write about it on DP Review, and it's great to have him here on the show just to talk about all the logistics that go behind these light shows. So welcome, Nils. Thank you for being on today.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So how did it come about that you were hired to do the first light show for President Biden and Vice President Harris? And are you going to do more large-scale events like this in the future, either for them or other similar types of events?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think our vision is that drone shows are going to happen all over the place, right? That they're going to be, in the entertainment world, a standard part of the toolkit that designers can use for events of all kinds. And we see all kinds of use cases for them outside of traditional entertainment applications. So I fully anticipate there's going to be lots more events like what we did for President-elect Biden in the future. So to answer your original question on that, we do a lot of work with a company called Strictly Effects. They are a big pyrotechnic company that does work for people like Coldplay or WWE, anybody putting on a big show. They do all the different effects. And they purchase some of our drones and they deploy them on their shows, and we work together with them on this show. It was, as you might imagine, very, very last minute and very crazy. But clearly, we got there in the end, and I think it was a really, really nice effect. So, they pitched the concept to the production team that was producing the event, and they said, "Hey, what if we, include some drones with this? What do you think?" And we showed them some rendered content of what was possible, and they thought it was interesting. And then we did a test flight, and it matched their expectations. So then we got the green light to do the show.
Has it impacted your business significantly since then? That's probably an obvious question, but what's happened since then, since it got so much exposure?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's definitely raised our profile. I mean, a lot of people know about us now that didn't previously know about us, but obviously we're still in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and entertainment events are just not happening. Full stop. It's probably one of the worst industries to be in, because it's worse than being in a restaurant, because there is no takeout in concerts and events, right? There just is nothing. The entertainment industry went from 100 to 0 in the span of about a week last year, and it has yet to come back. Starting to change, but it certainly generated a lot of inquiries and a lot of interest, and I think it will positively impact our business moving forward. But because of the nature of the world today, it's not like doing the Biden event suddenly, like we did 100 shows afterwards, because shows just aren't happening at the moment. But clearly, I think it will, it's a nice reference application for us, and it will serve us well in the future.
So from a regulation standpoint, I can imagine that a normal show would be quite a bit of paperwork, quite a bit of approval, and I'm sure you have a blanket approval probably to do a lot of your shows. What happens with the presidential approval at that level? I can't even imagine the level of security that you had to go through to do this.
Yeah, you can't even imagine. It was crazy, and we're generally not allowed to talk about it. But suffice it to say, I think what you can imagine is probably close to reality. I mean, it was not an easy process.
So, how many drones were on that show?
Around 200, a little bit under 200.
200. Wow. Haye, go ahead. So yeah, you mentioned last minute. Can you tell us a little bit about how much time you had to prepare for this show, and also the kind of drones that you used, the flight time, just some of the specs of the drones that were used for this show?
Yeah, well, we've made our own drone. When we started on this project, which was around 4 or 5 years ago, it was impossible to go out and buy a drone that met our requirements. And there's some more options today, but still, there's nothing that's exactly what we want. So we decided to make our own drone, um, just so that we could build it exactly the way we wanted it to be. And we invested heavily in secure radio communication and having redundancy on that front. And that gives us a lot of interesting creative options moving forward. Um, so that's what we used on the show. In terms of how much time we had, it was all very last minute because I think the Biden campaign was not comfortable making any commitments on any front until they got closer to election day and they could kind of see how things were going. So it was, we had I think less than 2 weeks notice, and then obviously we arrived on site and then waited along with the rest of the world from Tuesday night to Saturday night before they did the show. But it was interesting. They really wanted to maintain the element of surprise, so we did not have a single test flight on site, which is just bonkers crazy. But it speaks to the accuracy of our programming technology and our pre-visualization system, because it ended up being perfect.
Are your drones very vulnerable to the different weather conditions? I mean, how much wind can they withstand, or rain, or any of those circumstances?
Yeah, we can withstand reasonably strong winds up to maybe 25 miles an hour, okay, and still do a show. We don't like to fly in rain. I mean, there are also visibility requirements from the FAA, so we've never flown a show in rain, and generally, I don't think it makes any sense. Um, but we've flown in the Middle East in dust storms and.
So what's the approval like to do this? Are you flying under Part 107? Are you flying under something else? Are you waiving? Yeah, Part 107.
Part 107, yeah. And then we have a waiver. So there's a process that the FAA has established, and you go through the process and you submit a lot of paperwork and explain what you're doing, and you just have to convince them that you know what you're doing and that what you're doing is safe. Um, and we're now on our second waiver. We got our first one a bit over 4 years ago, and we just renewed it, and it was a pretty painless process. I mean, there was a bit of back and forth, but I think the FAA is pretty responsive these days, and we found them very good to work with.
And especially if you've been doing this for a while. I'm always kind of wondering when I see these shows, what happens when one of the drone doesn't work or you have a battery issue? Does it come back? How do you control 200 drones and then you need to only control one drone? What's the team? And I know I have a lot of questions, but what's the team behind the scene that controls this? Is this like 10 people, 20 people, 200 people that control these drones? What does that look like?
Yeah, we have one person per drone. So if we have 200 drones, we bring a bus load. Actually, it's about like 6 bus loads of people, of 200 people,
Wow.
each one controlling. I don't know. No, that's a joke. Okay. So, no, I mean, we just need one person to do everything. I mean, it's all computer controlled. Okay. And then there are monitors that we have on site. And if something is not quite right, it's indicated on the screen, and then the pilot in command can decide to land that drone or let it continue, depending on what's going on. But generally, we like to catch these problems before the drones actually take off, right? So we monitor the drones and make sure they're in good health, and we can very easily swap out a drone at the last minute if we see something that's not quite right, because every drone carries a full copy of the show for every other drone. So literally, you can put any drone in any location, and the show will still work flawlessly.
And how many lights do you have on board of these drones? Because that's obviously the key to the show, right? Is having them be visible. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. It's just four big LEDs, RGBW, and they're similar to they're the exact same, LEDs that are used for lighting otherwise. We have around 900 lumens of total output, and which is quite bright and plenty bright enough for these kinds of applications.
If people want to see some of your upcoming drone shows, is there like a calendar where we can go to find out where your drones are going to be flying next, or how would we find out?
Well, at the moment, people aren't doing events, right? So we actually have some shows coming up, but they're not pre-announced. People are flying content to distribute via social media, right? So there's a lot of that going on at the moment. We're actually, we're doing, that being said, we are doing one that is pre-announced. We're doing a fireworks show this weekend in Evans, Georgia, or Augusta, Georgia. After that, I think all the events we're doing are sort of not publicly announced, but that will change, right? I mean, I think in the US at least, as we get into summer, things are loosening up. And once we get past summer, I think life will be close to normal in the entertainment world, because there's just so much, pent-up demand for people to go see shows. And I think events are going to come back very strong. And I predict that next year, 2022, will be just bonkers insane in terms of, these types of events.
Do you see that people are moving away from traditional fireworks because of environmental concerns and then moving towards more drone shows? Is that a trend?
For sure. How big the trend is unclear. But I mean, there are a lot of places where there are concerns regarding fire risk, from the fallout from fireworks, or disturbing animals, or disturbing people with PTSD, or there is some concern regarding the environmental impact in terms of some of the chemicals used with fireworks. I don't really know whether that's true or not, but I've heard that mentioned. So there are these concerns that are out there, and there are definitely situations where drones are being substituted for fireworks. But I personally, I don't think drones are going to eliminate fireworks. I don't have that vision myself, but I think there will be a trend where drones do more things. And I also think that the most impactful shows are going to be the ones where you have drones and fireworks, right? I mean, it's like any other entertainment event. The more elements you have in your toolkit, the more impactful the show is. So in thinking about it like in a traditional concert environment, right? If you have lights plus video plus pyro plus blah blah blah, the more gags you have, like the more impactful your show can possibly be, and this is no different.
Yeah, when I had talked to you for the DP review article celebrating the show for President-elect at the time, Biden's display, you had said that you want to make it more accessible for people to put on their own shows, I believe. And that being said, because a lot of, when you think of the trained staff you need to pull off a huge drone fireworks show, or drone light show, it's quite costly, and not everyone has that kind of budget. How do you foresee that when things start opening up again? How do you foresee that process playing out? I mean, would you provide the software? You obviously need special waiver from the FAA to be able to fly more than one drone at a time.
Right now, our company, we have two business models which we operate at the same time. Okay, so we're primarily a technology company. We're developing this technology for drone shows, and we want people around the world to use our technology. That being said, this is a new industry, and there's some unique requirements. Like in the US, you need a waiver from the FAA. And so at this stage in the process, we've been very hands-on. We both sell our technology to other companies that want to put on their own drone shows, but we also provide a turnkey solution to clients. So we come in and we take care of everything. And we make the show happen. Over time, I think we will become, or I know we will become, less of a service provider as we build up a network of companies doing, drone shows around the world. Clearly in the U.S., I think there's an opportunity for at least 100 different companies operating drone shows in every market, and we've spent a lot of time on creating the platform so that this can be done economically. So you have to have a drone that comes in at the right price. You have to have the right software that allows you to design shows quickly. You then have to be able to deploy a show quickly. And right now, I can have 2 people run a 200 drone show, no problem, right? I mean, I just need, at a minimum, I need a pilot and 1 visual observer. In some situations, I might require more visual observers, kind of depending on what's going on. But from a pure logistical point of view, our system is really easy to use. So like a couple of people can deploy a couple 100 drones, no problem. And that is one piece of bringing the cost down. And then the other thing that's really, really important is that the programming tools are there so that any reasonable person can, create their own show. They can import their own logo. They can design their own effects, whatever it is. They need to be able to have those tools to be able to rapidly create shows. And you shouldn't have to write computer code, or you shouldn't have to use third-party software and then import and manipulate. And, I think that's been one of the missing links to the uptake of drone shows to date is and that side of things. But, you got to have, it's a mix of elements, and you've got to have them all come together, to get to the nirvana point, which is any, reasonably competent person can deploy this and program all these drones efficiently in a cost-effective manner, right? That's when you see, drone shows really coming into their own and not just being a, unique boutique item only reserved for the highest profile events with the biggest budgets.
Nils, you mentioned that you guys started working on developing these drones 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, in the drone industry, that's quite some time ago. Can you tell us a little bit about how you guys got started, why you got started, where the idea came from to start building your own drones and launching drone shows?
Yeah, so I had seen a TED video about 10 years ago with Professor Vijay Kumar, who's now the Dean of Engineering at the University of Pennsylvania. And he flew drones in formation at TED, and it was like really cool. And I was like, wow, that is so awesome, because I personally have always had an interest in aviation. I got my pilot's license right when I turned 17, and then I've worked a lot in entertainment. I've done some startups previously in the entertainment space, and worked on a lot of concert touring applications and things like the Olympics and stuff like that with my technology. And to me, this was like the perfect intersection of my interests. So I got super excited about the idea, but it was kind of on the back burner, and I wasn't really sure how to approach it, and I wasn't really sure who to do it with. So finally, I start looking around to find an engineering team to, work on the problem with. And I'm not an engineer myself, so, I need some help. Although I was so inspired by the TED video, I almost wanted to go back to school and become an engineer, but, that's not entirely practical. So eventually I found this engineering team that had been previously primarily working at Boeing, and they were working on a drone project which got canceled. And so they're like, hey, let's start a drone company. And they didn't really know what they're going to do. But eventually they found their way into the entertainment space because they got introduced to somebody who wanted to do some things. And long story short, I found them, we joined forces, and I was able to give them a very clear vision of what was going to be necessary for drones to be useful in these kinds of applications. Okay, because my first company I started up did lighting control systems for concerts. And the problem here is almost identical to controlling automated lighting and other effects in concerts. It's very, very similar, and many of the same considerations and whatnot. So, my vision was then, okay, we need an equivalent piece of technology to make it easy to program and deploy the drones. So we got started on that, and it was, again, myself and these 3 engineers, and we figured it'd take us maybe a year to get to V1, and it took more like 3 years to get to a solid V1. But, we got there in the end, and my team has done everything. I mean, except for the autopilot, where we use, an open source autopilot, we've done everything else. And it was a lot of hard work. And it was a bit like peeling the onion, it's like, it doesn't seem too complicated at first glance, but there's a lot of angles to this, and there are a lot of things to get right. And there's a whole, there's this whole safety component, okay, which you don't otherwise have in, most entertainment applications, save pyrotechnics, right? But you've got to make it really, really safe, so that these drones don't fall out of the sky and hit people in the head or fly off and do other things, So it took us a while, but we got there in the end, and my 3 very dedicated and really smart engineers have done a great job. And, our company has had like 3 people doing the work of probably far larger teams at other people in this space, right? So it's pretty impressive what they've been able to pull off.
It's very impressive, I would say. I mean, can you also tell us a little bit perhaps about the first show that you guys did, and what show that was and when that took place?
Yeah, we actually we went out to Dubai a couple of years ago during the winter, because winters in Philadelphia aren't exactly the most conducive to sitting out in the field and doing drone shows and stuff. And winters in Dubai, as it happens, are very stable and nice weather, and it's not too hot, it's not too cold, and it's perfect. We had an RC field out there that we were able to use, and we did just a bunch of testing there and development, and the team kind of went into the bunker, and we did a show out there before we left. So that was our first show, and then we did a music video, and then we did some other little bits and pieces, and we were starting to build momentum, and then of course coronavirus hits, right? And everything went out the window, as it did for everybody else, right? So it was a bit gloom and doom, but we decided just to double down and refocus our efforts on development, and use the lull to add some additional features that we were planning on doing further down the road, and just really, really focus on the technology and try and make it really robust and solid, so that when the world returns to normal, we're ready. But what happened is, although we didn't do many events in entertainment, we started doing other things, a lot of like product launches, and obviously the Biden thing, some political stuff and other bits and pieces. And so, we were able to piece together some other work to keep us busy and keep things moving forward. And that was really important for us, because, every time we do a show, we get better, right? So just iterating and iterating and iterating. And my engineers have been very involved in doing these shows, so they feel the pain themselves when their software is clunky or whatever it is, right? They're feeling that pain, so it motivates them to, fix those things and get them right. So that's actually been pretty, it worked out okay, even though I was very concerned about what our future looked like. But, starting last summer, we were able to, get some events here and there, and start returning to at least some reasonable level of commercial activity.
So Nils, I'm a customer and I come to you and I say, hey, I want to put on a drone show. What does that look like in terms of the process? Do you sit down? Do you have a list of pre-defined movement of the drones that we can pick from? Obviously, I'm sure you do a lot of customized work as well for people. Do you have a creative person on staff that's going to help design all this thing? Because I mean, the designing of the show and the engineering is two completely different things. Making the drone fly and then making it look pretty is completely different things. So how does that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, the engineering is basically a non-issue at this point because the system works, it's done, okay, and we've created the programming tools. So it's really all about the design, and because we have robust programming tools, we can be really flexible. We don't have to just rely on stock content. We can make whatever people want fairly easily. So most of our shows are custom, although we might recycle some elements, that kind of thing. But generally, each show is unique and tailored to the requirements of that individual customer. So the process is somewhat variable depending on who they are. People will come to us with highly scripted shows, and they're like, I want this, and I want that, and I want that, and bam, 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 bam. Other people are more like, hey man, I want a drone show. They're really cool, give me something, right? and they have no idea what they want. They just want something really cool, okay? And then, we try and make something really cool. And that's as much information as we're given. And most are kind of somewhere in between, right? So it all depends.
Yeah, so I'm sure you have a lot of suggestion probably to say. Is there something that you notice that is more appealing? I know text obviously is probably something where people want to send a message. I saw some of the drone shows where they have movement, like a bicycle that's moving forward. Have you found things that are a bit more appealing and things that maybe you should stay away from when you do these kind of shows?
Yeah, so I mean, generally, I want to keep pushing forward and make them more and more interesting. I mean, in the beginning, it was, I call them like marching band shows, logo 1, transition to logo 2, transition to image 3, right? And in the beginning, it's kind of like, wow, that's really cool. Those are drones, right? I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. But then obviously that gets old. So, I mean, there are a lot of people out there pushing the boundaries and trying new things. I mean, some of the stuff that's happening in Asia is amazing, with thousands of drones and intricate shapes. My philosophy is that sometimes more is less, and you don't necessarily need thousands of drones to do things that are compelling. I think the sweet spot for most shows is somewhere between 150 and 300 drones. That's kind of the right balance between keeping it manageable and keeping the costs reasonable, and yet still giving a robust number of pixels that can generate a wide variety of content. Right, so. There are really interesting three-dimensional things that can be done, but and obviously animation, as you mentioned, right? But 3D is a lot harder than it seems at first glance, because you have this issue that the pixels on the back side of a volumetric shape will distort the image as viewed through the front, right? So to make it work, you kind of need to occlude the back. But if people are viewing it from different perspectives, it can be really, can be challenging. So it's a lot harder than, it might seem to begin with, just because of those issues.
What's the flight time on those drones that you can get up to? How long can the show be?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay. Wow.
And is there a limit as to how many drones you can fly, or doesn't really matter?
No limit.
Yeah.
So I saw a QR code created recently, and it made the rounds on the internet. Now, I know a lot of people still aren't gathering. Things haven't really opened up. But do you see brands using QR codes as a way to get attention? Is it something that people could take with their phone a picture of that QR code, and get directed to a site. Do you see that as a possible use case?
For sure. People seem to be really interested in that concept. We've gotten a lot of calls and inquiries since that was flown in China.
That's funny. That's something that I would never scan, just being afraid of not knowing what that code goes to. But that's just me personally.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, one of the, yeah, right, exactly. But I mean, I think the two really immediate and compelling use cases for drone shows are, one, traditional entertainment. Okay, these events we've been talking about. The second is flying billboards. Okay, so you might not just fly a QR code, but if you can fly, some logos and some messaging, and then you end with the QR code, and here's where you go for more information, and the user doesn't have to, type in a URL. I think for an advertiser, that's extremely compelling.
Yep, that makes a lot more sense, I think.
Has your company ever been approached by customers who are looking to use your technology in a different way? So not so much for a drone light show, but just the interest that you can manipulate 200 drones at once and use them in a way that you guys hadn't even thought of yet, or?
Yeah, I mean, we get some inquiries here and there for different use cases. I think there will be more of that in the future, but it's kind of hard to predict. But I mean, we've developed technology to control, flying robots. A fleet of flying robots, and there's no reason why those robots couldn't be on the ground. They're just IoT devices, and those robots can be doing all kinds of different things. So it's really hard to predict the future that way, but I definitely feel like our core technology will be deployed in all kinds of ways that we can't really even begin to consider today.
Do you think the military would be one of those applications?
Swarms of drones?
Well, I mean, they're already doing swarming. I mean, I think they're more interested in autonomous swarms, and ours are not autonomous. And, we're not doing any military work, and I don't think that's particularly a direction we're likely to head in. But, I mean, I guess you never know. Certainly things like, search and rescue, right? So maybe not military, but, you think about search and rescue, deploying, instead of sending out one drone to look for people, you have, 100 drones, okay, that scour an area to find a missing person or whatever it might be. I think that's a really interesting use case.
Yep.
Yeah. Do your drones have any obstacle avoidance sensors or anything like that built in, or is it just because they're programmed they don't need anything like that?
No.
Yeah.
It's all programmed. It's just all pre-programmed.
So GPS, does it use GPS for location?
Yeah. GPS and RTK to enhance the GPS.
Okay. And I had another question about, are you, as drones obviously become more popular, we see more of them flying up in the air. Are you worried, and do you have a system in place to prevent non-participating drones from, messing up your show?
We do not. And that's a really complicated area, both legally and technically, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously we have visual observers and we're paying attention to the surrounding airspace, and we want to make sure that nothing interferes, whether it's another drone or anything else. But we don't have any special avoidance, technology or anything like that other than the human eye.
Yeah, I could see this as being an issue. Somebody wanting to check it out and get closer, like they do with firework, for example, and kind of messing up what you guys are doing. Hopefully not.
Yeah, but I mean, part of our operating procedures are, we have to make sure that the ground is clear underneath. There's a safety, distance to where spectators are, that the nearby airspace is clear. All this kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that the space where we're operating is safe, right? And that's really important.
Yeah. Now, this may sound like a stupid question. Oh, just one more question. Do you have one person walking around turning on 200 drones, or can you do that from a distance?
Well, we keep them. No, we actually have a physical switch to turn them
To turn
on,
on.
and we also plug in the batteries, right? So
Yeah.
we will keep them unplugged, and then at some point, prior to showtime, we'll plug them in and just have them standing by and ready to go.
Gotcha.
I had a question for you. If you look into the future, let's say the next 3, 4, 5 years, what will be on your wish list of things to happen, either in terms of the technology that you use for the drones, or the regulation, or the effects and the shows themselves? Like, what kind of things would you like to see happening to make drone light shows even more spectacular than they already are?
I mean, I think it's just a continuation of what's the trends that are happening now. From our point of view, we just want to continue making them, more cost effective and easier to use. And from a regulatory point of view, we'll see how things evolve. There are new rules that have come into effect in Europe, and in general, whether it's the U.S. or Europe or anywhere else. I just hope that we can continue the current trend of allowing competent operators to easily get approval to do what they want to do. And I think in the beginning of all of this, there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of concern around safety, and the regulators wanted to be very certain that people were operating in a safe manner and weren't doing crazy stuff, and they created a process that people needed to follow. And I guess we'll just see how things evolve, and hopefully the current trends will continue, and it will get continually easier for people with the right technology to do these things.
And you've done these shows all over the world. Have you seen a country that makes it easier or harder for you guys to do what you do?
Well, the U.S. is awesome for the most part, right? Because the U.S. issues a blanket waiver. I mean, we can go fly anywhere in Class G airspace whenever we want, assuming we file an OTAM in advance. Europe hasn't reached that level yet. That's now starting to happen. But, Europe has been on a case-by-case basis, and there's been a painful amount of paperwork required, every time you want to do a show. So, the U.S. has actually been quite on the forefront of this, and generally it has worked well for us. And, we've also flown in restricted airspace, and you have to file the appropriate paperwork, but we've never been... Yeah, we have yet to be denied. Like sometimes there are more challenges, but we have yet to be denied. Actually, the one place that would be helpful to fly in would be New York City. I mean, New York City actually is not very excited about seeing drones fly, within city limits. So we flew a show on Governor's Island, and that's all we've been able to, pull off. But I mean, personally, I see no reason why you couldn't fly a show safely in Central Park, for example, or in other locations. So, at some point, I assume that will happen. But New York has very restrictive drone regulations, and for good reason, right? They don't want people flying drones around and checking out buildings and crashing into buildings and then landing on people's heads. That's obviously something to be avoided. So, but hopefully they'll become a little more open to seeing, drone shows in certain locations perform safely.
If you were to fly a drone show in New York, I mean, let's picture New Year's Eve, the ball dropping Times Square, and now we have a drone show. I mean, how worried would you be about GPS interference, Wi-Fi interference, thousands of people with cell phones? Like, are those things that impact your show, or is your system so separate that that's not as much of a concern?
Well, those are all real issues. I mean, you're never going to fly a show in Times Square, full stop. Right? Yeah. I mean, unless it's essentially an indoor show, okay, with smaller drones in a very confined space. You're never going to fly an outdoor show in in that location because of the safety aspects, and there are too many people and there's too much stuff. And yes, from a GPS perspective, if you're in a canyon, whether it's a skyscraper canyon or a real canyon, I mean, acquiring satellites to use GPS is going to be an issue for sure.
Yeah, you need GPS in order to position and locate these drones. I mean, they're not depend, or would it be possible? Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean, there are other positioning technologies, right? And there are people who fly drones indoors, and there's a whole slew of limitations in terms of what's possible there. So, there are alternative positioning technologies that one can use, but GPS is not advisable in that kind of scenario.
Yeah. Do your drones fly indoor as well, or no?
No. We're just purely outdoors.
So I read on Drone Life recently that you've been advising the host of Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigations. Can you talk a little bit more about how that came about?
Yeah, well, I don't know that we've been advising them, but it was interesting. If you remember, like a year ago, maybe a little bit, more like a year and a half, right? There were all these drones being spotted flying around Colorado and Nebraska and whatnot, and exactly what transpired there is still, I think, unclear. But they have a show devoted to researching these kinds of phenomenon, and they were wondering if drones like ours could possibly have been one of these things that was cited, right? And so that was their interest, and so we helped them. We put on a show to kind of demonstrate what that would look like, and they filmed it to cite that as a possible source of these unidentified sightings, right? So that was fun to do. They kind of came out and they filmed, and we chatted a bit, but they were probably advising us more than we were advising them, if you know what I mean.
So we always finish the show with a fun question, and the question is, what's your favorite drone to fly other than your own drone?
Well, I mean, I've got a DJI Mavic, which I think is amazing. You look at the amount of technology that is crammed into this tiny drone, and the quality of photos and videos you can get out of it. It's just mind-boggling, right? So I mean, DJI has been unbelievable with the technology that they've developed, and they've done some really nice work. So. That would be my favorite drone otherwise. But, it just keeps getting better and better. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff coming out. I mean, what Skydio is also doing at the moment is really impressive. And then, there are people, building drones with extended range and all kinds of crazy, payload capabilities and things. And I'm just super excited by what's happening in this space, and I think it's just going to get a lot more interesting over the coming years. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's going to be interesting to see what comes up. Well, Nils, we really appreciate your time this morning, joining us. I think this is a space that is still fairly new, that a lot of people don't realize what kind of the behind the scene is. So I'm glad you could shed some light and provide your insights. And we hope that we can see, your next show and see it live and see what happens. But wish you the best for the future of all the drone shows.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.